So, welcome back. We are now going. We are talking about the financial inclusion, and in financial inclusion, certain recent developments I thought I should be discussing, and I should spend at least 1 to 2 minutes time on that, so that it should look complete. Because we have discussed the C. Rangarajan committee, we also discussed the microfinance institutions. So, I thought it is good that I should shed some light on the financial inclusion process that we have undertaken, and then we will go for the monetary policy formulation. So, the financial sector is now over. I think I have covered almost all segments, and it is quite comprehensive. So, I think it took more than 10 sessions to finish this financial sector of India, because we have so much diversity in the financial sector that it is very difficult to cover with few sessions. I think if I have a time, then I can take one more in NPTEL course on the financial side of the India's economy, because that will cover everything. But keeping in mind the time limitations, let's move to the monetary part. So whatever I am going to discuss about the financial inclusion process. So let's first finish this, then we will start the monetary policy. So on August 28, 2014, we had a very important program launch. It is called Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana, and this Yojana was launched on August 28, as I mentioned. And the idea was that there should be some kind of financial inclusion process with the incentive of the account holders, that they should be having extra incentive. So as I mentioned, we started with the no frills account, then we had gone for opening up the passbook, then we had gone for the issuing of the general credit card. But after that, it was also found that there should be some kind of social coverage for the account holders, those who are going to have the account. And since we are into the information business, so once if somebody is going to give you information about the personal detail, because nowadays data is the most important resource and most costliest, not the oil. So keeping that in mind, that it is some kind of incentive, some incentive must be given to the household if they are going to reveal some information, and that's why it became one of the flagship programs of the government. So as the website of the PMJDY, so it is called Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana. So PMJDY mentions January 27, 2021, the total number of beneficiaries are around 41.75 crores, with the total deposits of 1,37,755 crores. The RuPay card has also been issued under the PMJDY. So this is the card which also has the RuPay operations plus the maintenance by RuPay and plus some insurance coverage. Government also launched the Jan Dhan Darshak app that also helps the rural masses to locate bank branches, post offices, and in the rural segment it becomes really difficult to locate. So I hope it is quite useful and it is being used. So there was a scheme of transfer of money and it was called Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Package, PMGKP, as a direct benefit transfer scheme, and it was also launched through the PMJDY. So the money were transferred, whatever was in terms of 500 or I think it was about 500. In 2018, government also launched the RuPay card insurance scheme with the coverage of 1 to 2 lakh for PMJDY account holders. So these are the recent outlooks of the PMJDY. But PMJDY scheme has also been in controversy because of the non-operational accounts. So the paper that I mentioned about the paper that I had mentioned of the Deepa Rohit Can Jan Dhan Yojana Achieve Financial Inclusion, it talks about those issues, that how Jan Dhan Yojana is not the only scheme that will be enforced through the PMJDY, because there are concerns that once the account is opened, so non-operational accounts are one of the important issues to be discussed, and that's why it is important that one should be analyzing the data. So the website of PMJDY gives the data at a state level, even at the district level. So if some of you are interested to analyze this particular scheme, then it will be interesting. I find some kind of a simple write up on PMJDY, but there is a need to analyze the data in detail and find it out that what is going on with this particular scheme. Then there is a important scheme, keeping in mind that mobile phone is going to be one important instrument, and it can help generate for the government it has become one of the convenient tool to provide services, direct services. So there is in case of Kenya and all other countries, it has been successful. So in India, there was JAM Trinity. So for the first time, I read in the economic survey of 2017-18 or so, and in that survey it was mentioned that about the JAM Trinity, which means that a person who has the Jan Dhan Yojana account, a person who has the Aadhaar, and a person who has a mobile number, these three will be helpful, because in India, especially in case of subsidies, it has been found that there are incidences of leakage, high leakage, and which means that the policies which are designed for the required set of people, there is some kind of mismatch happening, and because of that the beneficiaries or the benefits are not reaching to the true or genuine beneficiary, especially in terms of subsidies that we give on the cooking gas and some other. So in India right now, the subsidy on cooking gas is the only major subsidy that we see. So JAM is expected to help the government in direct benefit transfer. A scheme meant to transfer the subsidy to the eligible beneficiaries that we have. In 2020-2021, 2,10,244 crores sent to the accounts as part of these schemes, and now because of this JAM that we have, the Jan Dhan account plus the Aadhaar plus mobile number, now it has helped in terms of facilitating the MG Narega schemes, plus the identification of some bogus accounts, bogus workers, those who were not a part of this but they were getting the benefit. So JAM has helped the government in identifying the genuine beneficiary in different welfare schemes. For instance, 5.5 lakhs bogus laborers were weeded out from the MG Narega scheme till December 2019, but this also needs verification that whether those workers which were weeded out, they also had a alternative livelihoods option or not. If they did not have, then at least there should be some kind of benefit given. Till April 2016, about 17,000 crores of subsidies on cooking gas were saved because it was not transferred based on this JAM Trinity. So JAM Trinity is going to be one of the important topics to be discussed in future. So I thought this is also helping the financial inclusion process, because it is facilitating. So once we have Jan Dhan Yojana account, you have Aadhaar card and the mobile numbers, and this also helps. So if somebody will ask what is JAM Treaty, then you should be at least able to answer. So this completes the financial inclusion chapter. Now I will be moving to the new topic. So the financial sector is over now. In case if I am left with any topic, then I will be covering towards the end of this course. But now we will be moving to the financial sector, monetary policy. Then after that, I have to cover the fiscal policy, the recent changes in the fiscal policy, and then we will have the WTO issues, and then we will conclude this particular course. So the monetary policy objectives, that if you see, so it is important that since we are dealing with India's economy and we have covered the historical aspect of each and every policy, so it is important that we should be covering the monetary policy also, and we should at least provide some background of this, that what is this policy is all about. So monetary policy is in the hand of the central bank. So central banks takes care of the monetary policy. And one of the major objectives of the monetary policy is that it has to work on the price stability process, which means that it has to ensure that inflation does not rise so high that it becomes unbearable for the large section of the people. So just to make sure that the inflation does not rise high, so the central banks regulates. And now after the Sri Krishna committee report that we just discussed, now we have a certain inclusion coming from the government. So the finance ministry has also become one of the partners in managing. But if you trace the history, that what were the objectives of the monetary policy in India since independence. So, if you look back from the what historical perspective that I have given in terms of the planning process, then you will find that in the beginning the major concern was the infrastructure bottlenecks and then the food supply. So, during 1960s, inflation was majorly a phenomenon linked to the either bad monsoon, or it was also linked to the availability of limited food grains in the country, till we introduced the green revolution process, and then we had sufficient food grains in the 1970s, and then we were looking beyond that. And in 1960s we also experienced a very unusual trend. So, in 1960s we had to go for external or for geopolitical issues. So, we had geopolitical issues in the mid of or in the beginning of 1960s. Because of that, we had to go for extra borrowing and we had to finance those geopolitical issues, and that also resulted in the scarcity of resources, and as a result the inflation became one of the important issues to be discussed. So, in the beginning of the monetary policy formulation, price stability and inflation targeting was the sole purpose of implementing the monetary policy, nothing else, till we entered into the phase of stabilization, where we were in the era of 80s. So, 80s was the era where we started looking after the well-being of the people. We started looking for the expansion of certain sectors, though we were not doing very good in terms of the industrial sector because of certain domestic regulations, but still the monetary policy was more or less focused on the inflation part. Then there was a committee set up by, it is called Professor Sukhmay Chakrabarti committee. So, Chakrabarti committee in 1985 it was set up, had suggested that, so in price stability means that it does not mean that zero inflation, it means that there should be some kind of tolerable level of inflation, which because inflation is also an incentive for the seller, but we have to think that sellers also have the incentive to sell the product. If the inflation will be low, then of course sellers would not be interested and we may have to go for heavy import. So, those kind of things. So, at that time this committee, Sukhmay Chakrabarti committee, had recommended the inflation rate of 4% tolerable in case of India, because at that time we had sufficient resources. So, until I am talking about the mid 1980s. So, mid 1980s we had sufficient. During 1960s and even 1980s, the price stability by managing inflation remained a major concern. Committee to review the working of the monetary system, headed by the Professor Sukhmay Chakrabarti, suggested that the monetary targeting with an acceptable level of inflation, that 4%. He had also recommended for monetization of fiscal deficit, that is called the deficit financing, which means that central bank should go for government should go for borrowing from RBI, and it had also recommended for the targeting of the money supply through the broad money, that we have M3. So, M3 will be discussed, what are the components of M3. So, you can see that since the beginning we were focusing on the inflation, but in 1980s we started targeting some other indicators also, the domestic expenditure, which is the fiscal deficit, and in terms of money supply that we have. Then in April 1998, RBI had formally adopted what is called the multiple indicator approach. And this multiple indicator approach is important to examine, because in 1998 when we had liberalized our economy, we were also quite vulnerable to external shock. Exchange rate was also one of the important issues to be analyzed. Then we had the capital inflow, capital outflow issue, and then we also looking for some kind of adjustment in terms of trade. So, overall it was realized that now our economy is not a completely closed economy, we are open economy now. So, we have the open economy issues. So, it is better that we should not look for the internal issues, we should also focus the variables or parameters of external economy. So, at that time money, credit, output, trade, capital flows, fiscal position, exchange rate management, rates of whatever activities that we have, returns of different securities, different markets. For example, money market you have here you have, and then also you have the different types of government securities traded, and the inflation rate. So, apart from inflation, we have the host of indicators to be monitored by the central bank, and based on that they decide about the interest rate. So, they have the money, then they have the credit, then they have the output, then you have the trade. Output means GDP growth, then trade means whatever current account, in terms of we have the current account deficits. Then capital flows, whatever we have in terms of high liquidity or higher inflow of either foreign portfolio investment or any kind of investment that we see, even the forex reserves. Fiscal position, exchange rate management, all these things are part of the multiple indicator approach. Now, if you try and understand from the perspective of the management, so then you have the different instruments to control the money supply or to implement the monetary policy in the country. But before that, I should be giving you some idea about how we can go for. So the Reserve Bank of India has been empowered to conduct the monetary policy, and it has been mandated under the RBI Act of 1934. Since May 2016, through amendment of RBI Act, RBI has now complete control on the inflation target. So, a flexible inflation target that we have right now, the target is 4 plus minus 2, and the amended RBI Act that we have, it provides the inflation target to be set by the government in consultation with the Reserve Bank of India once in every 5 years. So, this inflation target that we have 4 plus minus 2, it is for the period from 2016 to 2021. But in economics, there is always a controversy that what should be the scope of functioning of the central bank. Now, how much a government should have the interference in the daily affairs or the primary affairs of the central bank. And for the first time, we have seen that the central bank autonomy is being encroached by the government, and now government is also having say in terms of inflation targeting, and that is coming from, if you remember, the Sri Krishna Committee, Financial Sector Legislative Reforms Commission, Indian Financial Code. It was also mentioned that the finance ministry will take a role in terms of finding out which all institutions will play a role in. So, now we have the Monetary Policy Committee. Let us work on the implementation. So, section 45ZB of the amended RBI Act 1934 also provides for an empowered 6-member Monetary Policy Committee. Who all will be the members of this committee? So, central government in September 2016 constituted the MPC, the Monetary Policy Committee. It will have the RBI governor by default ex officio, deputy governor RBI in charge ex officio, 1 officers of the Reserve Bank of India to be nominated by the central board ex officio, and 3 MPC members. So, right now we have Professor Ashima Goyal from IGADR, then we have Jayant Verma from IIM Ahmedabad, then we have Shashank Vide from NCAER. So, these 3 are the government nominated, and these all 3 are academicians. We had earlier first committee had Professor Pami Dua, then we had Professor Chetan Ghate, and one more name we had, it was also from the IIM Ahmedabad. I am forgetting the name, but first committee completed a term in 2020. The name was announced. The members of the MPC will hold office for a period of 4 years until further orders, whichever is earlier. So, this is what it is recommended. Monetary policy, if you think how it is being implemented, when we think about the rate of interest cut, or whenever we read in a newspaper that how this rate of interest cut is going to be decided. So, MPC is required to meet at least 4 times in a year. The quorum for the meeting of the MPC is 4 members. Each member of the MPC has 1 vote, and in the event of an equality of vote, the governor has a second or the casting vote. So, which means that each MPC members will have the 1 vote. In case of tie, the governor has the second or the casting vote. The resolution are adopted by MPC, published after conclusion every meeting MPC. So, on the website you will find that it is being mentioned, and it comes under the RBI Act 1934. One important document which I always recommend even to my students and even those who are from economics or those who are going to prepare for examinations. Apart from economic survey of the government, there is also a very important document published at the RBI website. So, if you go on the RBI website, you will find this something called monetary policy report. This 6 monthly report, and it comes it has all the topics, chapters discussed, and it is very important document because it is quite forward looking. So, if you read between the lines of this particular document, monetary policy report, then you will find that it is really important in terms of finding out what will be the future of the interest rate in India and how the inflation will be adjusted. So this becomes one of the important document to read. The Reserve Bank's monetary policy department assist the MPC in formulating the monetary policy. The Financial Market Operations Department FMOD operationalizes the monetary policy and mainly through day-to-day liquidity management operations. Financial Markets Committee FMC meets daily to review the liquidity conditions to ensure that operating target of the weighted average call money rate. So, these are the organizations within RBI, offices within RBI which are having a certain responsibility to look after the monetary policy formulations and day-to-day operations also in terms of liquidity management and also the weighted average call money rate that we have. Then if you look from the perspective of instruments, then instruments are really important. So, as I have discussed here that the central bank is now going under different. So, I hope it is clear for everyone that how we have understood. So, let's now think about the important rates that you will be reading in newspaper. So, in newspaper you might be reading that whenever we have a RBI MPC meeting coming, then there will be a lot of speculation in the newspaper, in the digital media, in print media, that how RBI is going to react to given the inflation and given the macroeconomic conditions, how they are going to take decision, whether the interest rate will be up or down. Once we have that kind of speculation or that kind of scenarios being discussed everywhere, then we have a understanding that which rate it is going to be decided. So, it is about the repurchase agreement rate, which is that the repo rate, and then we have the reverse repo rate. So, reverse repurchase agreement, which means that repo rate, when the central bank lends money overnight to the banks against the collateral of the government and other approved securities under the liquidity adjustment facility, which means that they will be surrendering some government securities in return of the loan, right. So, those things. So, in case of liquidity adjustment facility, why it is being mentioned, because these are repurchased. So, they will have to purchase those assets whatever they have kept under collateral. Reverse repo. So, repo rate is the lending rate at which RBI lends money to the bank. Reverse repo rate is just opposite. So, reverse repo rate, when banks if the banks are finding that they have the excess liquidity and they have excess cash and they want to keep money with the RBI, then in terms of purchase whatever they have given in terms of collateral. So, I would say returns of those securities, these banks will be parking money with the RBI. So, that is called reverse repo. So, repo means RBI is lending and reverse repo means just opposite, banks are lending. And liquidity adjustment facility based on the Narasimhan Committee 2 that we discussed, or Narasimhan Committee 1 we discussed, and then we had a Narasimhan Committee 2, it was in 1998. So, post that government has gone for a short term money supply tool. So, in case if banks are not finding it easier and if they have some trouble with the, so there is one more window open, and this liquidity adjustment facility it is in turn of the repo and reverse repo, and it also goes by the same collateral that they have to keep. So, liquidity adjustment facility is about the adjustment in the liquidity by either go for borrowing or go for lending, depending on that. Now, normally repo rate will be higher than the reverse repo rate, because RBI lends at a higher rate, but when it borrows, then the or when it has to take money from anywhere, then it gives the lower rate of interest on that. So, in the same way with the bank, when you go to borrow from the bank and if you take the loan, then of course you will have to pay higher rate of interest, but if you are going to keep money with the bank, then bank will offer you a very low rate of interest, right. So, in the same way, the same mechanism works here, that if the banks have to borrow from RBI, they have to pay a higher rate of interest, but when they keep their money with the bank RBI, then RBI will offer them a lower rate of interest. So, this is how it works. Then we have the marginal standing facility, MSF. It is also one of the important instrument to provide liquidity in case the banks are feeling shortage of liquidity. Then this particular the standing facility becomes operational, and through that banks can borrow. But there is a limit on SLR, that 1%. So, whatever is the limit, 1% of that, whatever is the net deposit, net demand and time liabilities of the banks. So, NTDL that we say, so NDTL that we say, so whatever is the size of the deposit adjusted for liabilities, then 1% of that amount can be borrowed through the marginal standing facility. This was a special window created for the banks, because there is a limit on the borrowing from the RBI, but here RBI through repo channel, and here in this case, in marginal standing facility, they can also go for extra. The only thing is that they will be having a some kind of, they will have to pay extra interest on that. So, this is what 1% of the repo, it is being normally assumed that 1% of the repo that they pay. So, here we have, so under LAF, liquidity adjustment facility, repo, which is this liquidity adjustment that we have, it goes like borrowing and lending. So, whether you are working with repo or reverse repo, that is the important thing that we should be knowing. So, a commercial bank can borrow from the central bank at the repo rate by pledging government securities over and above the SLR requirement. So, this is what we have. In the case of MSF, banks can borrow funds up to 1% at a rate higher than 1% rate of interest that you have. So, you will be paying 1% higher rate of interest than the repo rate. So, it means that now if you think, then if you are a bank, you have two options. You can go through the repo rate, borrow money, and it is overnight. So, you can borrow money, but and then you have to, because it is repurchase agreement, so you have to surrender some kind of securities, right. In case of marginal standing facility, you will be paying 1% higher rate of interest on the repo, but you will be given one more opportunity, that whatever SLR requirement that you have, or whatever is your deposit NDTEL, based on that 1% of that amount you can borrow through MSF, marginal standing facility. RBI continuously monitors and revises the rate of interest and the amount of borrowing dependent upon the monetary policy decision by the RBI. So these are from the, this is the borrowing and lending happening between the central bank and the bank. So, here we have the repo rate, reverse repo rate, and the liquidity adjustment facility, and the marginal standing facility that we have. So, this is between central bank and the bank. What happens if the SBI, suppose it is having some kind of liquidity crunch, and then it is asking money from the Bank of Baroda or other bank that you give me. So, they will also have overnight borrowing and lending, that is called call money market. When we have interbank borrowing and lending happening, then that is called the call money market, and this call money market is again an overnight interbank borrowing and lending. Overnight means just for few hours or so. So, this is what, where one day loans can be availed by banks to meet liquidity. Banks borrow money from surplus rich banks who has excess liquidity, And call money market is functional from Monday to Friday. So on RBI website, if you go on the first page, it will mention that what is the auction amount that is being there. So banks can access CMM to meet their reserve requirement, CRR, SLR to cover sudden shortfall in cash on any day. So anytime they can, so there is requirement of SLR, CRR. If there is any kind of variation, then they can meet by participating in the call money market. Another useful and related market is called notice money market, wherein a bank can borrow for more than a day. Normally it ranges between 2 to 14 days. So far I have covered this. In the next session I will be continuing this again, and I will be discussing the recent chapter on the financial markets and the intermediation in the economic survey, and I will be giving you some more insights about the recent policy measures. Those who are from non-economics, for them it is useful because you should be aware. Those who are from economics, you may find it quite easy and quite simple, but these tools are important to understand the root of monetary policy and how it should be analyzed. Thank you so much.